A very, very good evening, Tuesday, the 4th of February 2025. I am forever amazed that when I put out these transmissions that people get in touch with me and want to listen and join in. I'm still finding that completely heartwarming. So I say heartwarming, unusual, heartwarming. Very, very welcome to many of you who are new. My name is Raja Miah. I've been at this now for just under 6 years or so. And we've been probably using video as a format since around the time of COVID, where it proved to be valuable for a lot of people just to build a community. We used to put together these what they called Zoom type sessions and workshops. So if people are interested, I'm more than happy to put the Zoom workshops back on. I'll just take out a Zoom subscription and we'll launch some of the Zoom workshops again. And again, all of it's completely free. So my ask of any of you who join me in this work and on this journey is that if you can afford to do so, please do support me with a financial contribution. There's links pinned at the top. There's a Buy Me a Coffee site and also a PayPal site. There's a Red Wall and the Rabble page. It's only a couple of pound. If those of you who took value from my work all contributed a couple of pounds, I would never have to look at my bank account, or avoid looking at my bank account, wondering if I got enough for the mortgage and the electric bill and all of the things that normal people have to struggle with. But please, if you can, take out a subscription to Red Wall and the Rabble. It's the most consistent way of me understanding where I'm up to and what I need to do to get by. A subscription is only £3 a month, 75 pence a week. But again, it's entirely up to you. You can not subscribe and take all the content for free. You can subscribe for 75 pence a week, or you can subscribe for a lot more. I'll leave it open to people and prey on your goodwill that you find value in my work, and then because you find value in my work, you're willing to support me to continue. If you've followed my work over the last few weeks since January, and we've ramped it up, you've seen we've ramped it up, and I've been running up and down the country speaking to anyone who'd have me. I've not said no to anyone. There was at least one person I've spoken to that I knew came from a political space so far away from me, but I still went and gave them the courtesy of a conversation and let them interview me. So please, by all means, if you are wanting to interview me, if you want to talk to me, there was a woman called Sue from Wimbledon who managed to get hold of my number. Again, I say to people, I'm easily contactable for those who want to contact me. My details are in the public domain. My email, my phone number, even my address. So, if you get in touch with me, you want to speak to me, likelihood is I won't pick up the phone because I don't know who your number is. But if you leave a message like Sue from Wimbledon left this morning, I'm sure if she's here, she'll confirm I promptly phoned her back and I supported her with whatever she needed supporting with. So please, if you find value, at the very least, like, subscribe to this channel. It's completely free, and share the content. Most of you found me because someone else shared my content in a space where you came across me, and I'd like to believe that because you found me, the world makes a lot more sense. I'm not saying it's a better world, but it makes a lot more sense. That would be something. I have my first American podcast next week. So my first American podcast is next week. I'll put up all the details well in advance. I think it's next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. So that's next week. I know that Lotus Eaters, Dan from Lotus Eaters, has put a preview of the podcast up on YouTube. And even though it's ordinarily behind a paywall because of its importance, I know Dan has shared the link for free. So by all means, go and have a look at the Lotus Eaters podcast, where I speak to him on an issue that I think someone asked earlier, where does it end? And we had that conversation, where does it end? So please do go and watch, listen to however Dan and the Lotus Eaters team do it. And of course, for those of you who've asked me, yeah, and Dan will confirm this, Liam will confirm this, everyone who I've gone and spoken to will confirm this, I take no fee whatsoever. So I take 0 fee and I cover my own expenses, getting there and getting back. So if you are new to me and people are questioning my motives, ask the people who've been on this journey with me from the beginning as to what my motives are. There's no money in this, and if there's a lot, if there's money in this, then it's been made somewhere else. It's not been made by me. I simply live in a town, belong to a community, and I wanted to safeguard the children here. So that's it. I mean, my friend Gary will, not putting on the spot or anything, Gary, but he'll confirm with you that when he travelled down with me to London for the Heretics, wasn't it, Gary? You came down with me for the Heretics interview. And he'll confirm I picked up mine and his return ticket to London and the Nando's, which I very much enjoyed. So let me start this evening's transmission. Thank you very, very much. So please, if you're finding value, PayPal, buy me a coffee, please, if you can. If you can't, just like it and tell people that you find value in it, and that's worth millions. That's worth millions. He's done well, hasn't he, as Andrew, out of it. And also on X, it was over 1 million. Over 1 million. Oh, wow. Thank you. About 10 quid, thank you. Every penny's useful, thank you. So if you don't mind, there's a screen here with your chat, and I'm not going to look in that direction for a few minutes whilst I talk about what I think is a very important matter, and then I will look back again, and if there's any super chats and things like that or any questions, I will try my best to pick up on them. There was a lad who contacted me on X last week. Like many of you do, contact is a vague term. Tagged me in. And he was posting about how he was going to burn a copy of the Quran. And he was supporting me. And I get a lot of people, not a lot, I get a number of people who contact me with views and opinions I don't necessarily agree with. And I can see people try and draw me into their space. And I'm very clear on this. I'm very clear on this, and I think I need to start on this. I have two viewpoints on this. I believe them to be complementary rather than mutually exclusive. I believe them to be complementary. My first viewpoint comes from a place of my own life experience. I was 19, I think, when the Satanic Verses protests kicked off in the United Kingdom. And those of you who followed my journey will know I use that, a series of events around that, as one of the beginnings of our journey to an increasingly challenging place between those who I consider to be Islamists and political Islamists and the tensions with our way of life in terms of a liberal Western democracy. And what I saw, both on the news at the time and firsthand, is middle-aged Pakistani, Bangladeshi, mainly Pakistani men, angry, buying copies of the Satanic Verses and burning them. And as well as they were burning these books, they were also burning either the United States flags and our own flag. And it was because we, as a country, believed in freedom of speech. Some guy had written a book. I didn't know who Salman Rushdie was at the time, if I'm honest with you. And I went and read his book afterwards when I was much older to understand it and appreciate it. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but it was a book of fiction. And what he wanted to write, he could write. So those were the two complementary views I had. And if I didn't want to read it, I wouldn't read it. If it would cause me offence, so if I would be offended by it, then I wouldn't read it. So I have always struggled with the burning of books. And I've always struggled with the burning of books because I'm also a student of history. And I know what the burning of books leads to. As one of the final steps towards people killing people for no other reason than that different. So I'm not a fan of the burning of books, and I'm sure as hell I'm not a fan of burning of the flags of nations and stamping on them, particularly our own flag. So that's my starting point. So when I saw that post and he directed at me and he clearly wanted an interaction with me, I just didn't interact, because it was clear to me he'd already made his mind up and he'd gone on a journey. So that's that. At the same time, as someone who lives in a liberal Western democracy, and I was asked this yesterday by a Muslim friend of mine, by a devout Muslim friend of mine, what I thought of it. And I said, well, it's a free country. If he wants to burn a book, if he wants to burn my holy book, if he wants to burn a book, any book, he has the right for that freedom of expression. And just because I might be offended by what he's done, it doesn't mean that he's committed a crime. So that was my position on it, and I think it's clear. I think it's important that I clarify and confirm that with every one of you. I don't like to see the burning of books. I don't like to see the burning of flags. As a human being, I'm saddened by what has led to that space where someone feels they need to do that, because so much of our democratic systems and processes have surely collapsed before we get there, or people are completely incompatible with our way of life, and perhaps they shouldn't be here. And when I say that, I make reference to the guys who were burning the Satanic Verses 30 odd years ago. So that's that. But do I think he should be arrested and charged within hours, when in the back of my mind all that is taking place about those Rochdale brothers who battered those police officers? And actually, if it wasn't for reform threatening a private prosecution, I don't think he would have got charged. Those two brothers would have got charged. And then this guy like that, so many police officers turn up. The optics of what takes place, or what took place, has only further segregated us, further separated us, and we're more entrenched than we ever were before. And I'll come to that, Lily, I think. Or Lily's child, I'll come to that. Thank you, Caroline. So, that's where this started. Now, I've stopped believing in coincidences a long time ago. Thank you. Thank you so much. I've stopped believing in coincidences such a long time ago. And then hours after the arrest, and that makes the news, we hear in the Telegraph, and I subscribe to the Telegraph, so I'll bring up the article, that Angela Rayner is to set rules on Islam and free speech. And that's the headline. So let me just bring that up so you can see it. And I'll talk you through it. There you go. Yeah, they did, Debbie. They put his name and address, but Debbie, by now you know what they do. You've seen it. You've been on this journey with me. You've seen how they put my name, address. This two-tier policing is real, alive and well. I understand why he did it. I get that. I understand why he did it. It's okay. And I think I've made my position clear. And for those of you who don't know who Salwan Momika was, he was shot. He was killed, wasn't he? Only last week, because it was one of his ways in which he would protest, was the burning of the Quran. Yes. Same pose as Sean Fielding. So Angela Rayner to set rules on Islam and free speech. Ex-Tory Dominic Grieve, now this was a Remainer, that's what he was famous for, is tipped to head up advisory council, but critics warn blasphemy law could be created. Angela Rayner is planning to create a council on Islamophobia and is lining up a former Tory minister to lead it, the Telegraph can reveal. So a council on Islamophobia, a 16-strong council, is basically another word for a government task force. So she's creating a government task force on something she describes as Islamophobia. The 16-strong council will help advise on drawing up an official government definition for anti-Muslim discrimination and will provide advice to ministers on tackling Islamophobia according to sources. Dominic Grieve, the former Conservative Attorney-General and a prominent Remainer, has been recommended to chair the council within Ms Rayner's Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, as a politician who has been actively involved in tackling Islamophobia. He chaired the Citizens UK Commission on Islam, which aimed to promote dialogue between Muslim and non-Muslim communities, and wrote a foreword to a controversial all-party parliamentary group's report in 2018 that set out a definition of Islamophobia, which the Labour Party adopted. The definition has been criticised for being so widely drawn that it curbs free speech, amounts to a de facto blasphemy law, and stifles legitimate criticism of Islam as a religion. And that's Angela Rayner just before the general election in Tameside, where she was meeting with a group of predominantly Pakistani men trying to secure the vote. I've got the video, so I'll play the video in a moment. Among the 16 candidates shortlisted for the council is Kari Asim, a Leeds imam who was dismissed as a government advisor by the Tories in 2022 after backing calls for a ban on the film The Lady of Heaven about the Prophet Muhammad's daughter. So one of the advisors is a Muslim cleric who already wants blasphemy laws introduced. Ministers have yet to say whether they will adopt the all-party group's definition of Islamophobia or an alternative. So remember, the Labour Party have already adopted this definition. Opponents have urged them to shelve the plans because of free speech concerns. Robert Jenrick, so that's the Conservative who lost out to Kenny Badenoch for the leadership of the Conservatives, the Shadow Justice Secretary, said the government should drop its plans for such a deeply flawed definition of Islamophobia. Of course, we should tackle anti-Muslim hate wherever it occurs, but this definition is a Trojan horse for a blasphemy law protecting Islam. Why do Labour MPs think it is acceptable to mock Christianity but not Islam? Time and again, this Labour government displays an Orwellian disregard for freedom of speech. The all-party group, which was co-chaired by Wes Streeting, is not a nice man, who is now the Health Secretary, published this definition in 2018 after an 18-month consultation. And this is his definition. It stated, Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. I am a practitioner in anti-racism work. I sat in meetings that helped shape and form the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I've never come across anything so absurd as that. Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets the expression of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. In his foreword, Mr. Grieve said he greatly welcomed the report, saying it makes an important contribution to the debate as to how Islamophobia can best be addressed. It is well researched and can give all of us food for thought and positive action. Now, I don't agree with that at all in terms of well researched, and I'll go into that later on this evening. In 2019, Mr. Grieve was stripped of the Tory whip by Boris Johnson after rebelling on Brexit legislation. He stood as an independent candidate in the 2019 election. Asked about the council, Mr. Grieve said he had not received any formal approach from Angela Rayner's office, but he told The Telegraph, if I can be of assistance in doing something constructive requested by any government on a non-party political basis, I am willing to consider it. It depends on what it is and whether I can add value and help the wider public service. Asked about the definition of Islamophobia, he said, it was apparent at the time that defining Islamophobia is extremely difficult for perfectly valid reasons relating to freedom of speech. So the man himself confirms that it's at odds with freedom of speech. However, he said it was clear that perfectly law-abiding Muslims going about their business and well integrated into society are suffering discrimination and abuse. Rayner is also proposing a council on anti-Semitism, although it is understood that there are concerns among some within the Jewish community that another body is not necessary. So he wants a council of anti-Semitism, and those from the Jewish bodies are saying we've already got our way of dealing with this. And of course, the creation of the council comes on top of plans by the Home Office to expand the recording of non-crime hate incidents for Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. Paul Stott, co-author of a policy exchange report last week on extremism, said the government is giving off worrying vibes that it is potentially amenable to restrictions on blasphemy and that its mind is made up in favour of a definition of Islamophobia. If so, that is terrible news for freedom of speech. Okay. And then, of course, this guy gets charged. And the judge's comments, from what I've seen, essentially acknowledge that whether we've got them or not, she's abiding by blasphemy laws. I read a judge's comment earlier today on X. Now I struggle with all of this. I genuinely struggle with all of this. So where has it come from? If we are to believe Mr. Grieve, Dominic Grieve, he says it's clear that perfectly law-abiding Muslims going about their business and well integrated into society are suffering discrimination and abuse. So if we are to believe Angela Rayner's position, these definition and the legislation that will subsequently follow is because Muslims are under attack and the existing legal framework that protects minorities is not sufficient to protect the United Kingdom's Muslim community. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I live in and amongst my local Muslim community. Since I came back 5 or 6 years ago, not a day goes by. I go to the mosques, I go to funerals, I go to the businesses, I go to birthdays, weddings, all of that. I don't see it. I've never seen a mosque on fire or a mosque attacked. I've not heard, and if I have heard, the stories are few and far between, of girls being attacked and having their hijabs torn off their heads. When I was a child, the Muslim option on the meal, on the school dinners, was to push the sausage to the side and eat the rest. Now our children are fully catered for. Eid, schools close, children have off. I've even seen, in the town where I live, the civic centre lit up green at the taxpayer's expense to celebrate the birthday of the Prophet. I just don't see it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying where it does exist, it doesn't exist any more than any form of other prejudice and discrimination that takes place within our society. And I'm sorry to my friends in the Muslim community. What I do see is a higher level and an increasing level of anti-white prejudice. Hence the grooming gangs. Hence the anger towards wanting to deal with it and the deflection and the distractions. I genuinely sense experience, and I live in both worlds, a higher level of prejudice and discrimination to the wider white community from within the Muslim community, particularly those younger ones. Anger, genuine anger. And I think you'll have seen it in some of the pro-Palestinian type marches. So I don't buy the first reason that we need Islamophobia legislation of some form to protect Muslims. I don't buy that, and the evidence doesn't demonstrate that. And for the love of God, I say to the Conservatives, I say to Reform, I say to Labour Party MPs, please speak out and stop this. I live in Oldham. Well, I don't live in Oldham per se, but you understand what I mean. Even with the minimal levels of integration, George, have you ever heard of a mosque burnt down? I haven't. Thank you, Steve. So let's rule out the first reason. It is to protect Muslims. Let's rule that out completely. And let me bring up someone who has something to say on it. We'll back this up. His name is Dr. Charge Harjay, and he gave an interview. He's from the Oxford Institute for British Islam, and he gave an interview on GB News this morning.
Any move towards a potential definition of Islamophobia could do to a liberal society?
Absolutely. I don't think Islamophobia is actually the correct term. The correct term would be anti-Muslim prejudice. Islamophobia is a catch-all thing. Not all Muslims are, it's not a racist thing. You have black Muslims, you have white Muslims, you have brown Muslims, whatever you have. And this idea of Islamophobia is just a catch-all phrase to prevent a real free speech. I, as a Muslim, encourage and welcome criticisms and dialogue honestly about my faith. This idea you can't talk about someone wearing a hijab or a niqab or someone with a big beard or whatever the case may be, that's not anti-Muslim. Everyone has the right to express their views. We live in a society that lauds free speech and thinks it is our historic rights from Magna Carta onwards to have this idea of free expression. And we don't need in the 21st century to novel this, to restrict it, and to make it more difficult for people to have honest dialogue. In fact, when we don't have frank discussions, we have antipathy, hostility, and resentment building up. And in fact, we need a pressure valve, a release valve, so people can discuss these things openly without being called a racist.
Sounds like you should be on this council. I mean, you have a very balanced. It sounds like you should be on this council to come up with this.
Well, they will never have people like me because firstly, I'm not a Labour man, and I don't care about that so much. I care about Muslims and being British, and I think it's important that we have people, as your previous speaker said, people who are willing to rock the boat. Now, Rayner and company, they will have their disciples and their devotees on this council, despite what your previous speaker said. They will have their disciples and their devotees, and I think, you know, we need honest, fearless people out there, and Muslims especially, people like myself, but others as well, who can say honestly and openly, listen, yes, there is anti-Muslim prejudice, there is anti-Muslim feeling in this country, and we need to firstly discover the roots. I mean, for example, who does most of the so-called violent terrorism in this country? It's not Sikhs, it's not Jews, it's not Hindus, it's Muslims.
I trimmed off the last sentence, and his last sentence was, let's call a spade a spade. So there you have it. Those of us And we are few and far between, I think you've seen, from within this community who see this for what it is. We don't want a definition of Islamophobia. We don't want it introduced. And we know it will only cause further alienation and further division. And worse, it is, I said, sleepwalking to Sharia. I used the term. I think someone mentioned it earlier. I think the term sleepwalking is wrong. Sleepwalking comes from a phrase that Trevor Phillips used whilst he was chair of the Race Equality Commission. He used the term sleepwalking to segregation, which is why I used the term sleepwalking. No, I think you're right, the person who mentioned it. We're sprinting to Sharia. We're not sleepwalking. We know where we're going, and we're going at 100 miles an hour as fast as we can. So not only is there not a definition of Islamophobia necessary, I would argue completely the opposite. And I agree with this doctor, Dr. Taj, from the Oxford Institute for British Islam. I agree with him. If anything, there needs to be a reflective exercise, of Muslims into their own community, into our own community, into our own beliefs, and what we are doing to integrate, to form, and contribute and complement the lives of those of us here in a liberal Western democracy, and address our own prejudices. And actually the government, if anything, needs to intervene into our communities to address the underlying issues we have, which include in my opinion, my experience, a fertile breeding ground for extremism that's only got worse over the last year or so following the recent wave of violence between Israel and Palestine. So reason one, I talked about 3 reasons. That's reason 1. If it was, what was it, family fortunes, that and a cross, that's what would be on there. Now the second reason is there are those of us who believe that the United Kingdom, His Majesty's government, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner and the others, want to introduce this as a curb on free speech. Now let me bring up someone else. Peter from the New Culture Forum. He articulates the position
Concerns
far better than I would. Let me find Peter. Where's Peter gone? Here he is.
It is legitimate to criticise any religion, except this now might make it illegal.
Yes, they're very right to be very concerned. This is an incredibly dangerous thing that is being planned. Just to give you an idea, there is a new definition of Islamophobia which was adopted by Labour and which could well come in with this new council and become law. It's much broader. Islamophobia, Martin, anyway, is a made-up, nonsensical term, anyway. But what this new definition does is it actually makes virtually all criticism of Islam, or indeed Muslims, almost completely impossible. It will bring in a new blasphemy law. What it really means is that in order for multiculturalism to kind of keep working, our very freedoms are actually now going to be undermined. By that, I mean our freedom of speech, which is, absolutely basic in our country. No one should get any kind of special treatment. Yeah. We've always had the ability in this country, you remember Life of Brian, you remember all of these things, to criticise a belief system. Islam is a belief system. What this is doing is essentially outlawing any criticism of that, and indeed what it calls expressions of Muslimness. So what we're going to see is things like, for example, if you might mention Muslim grooming gangs. That's a problem. If you have a view that you want to express about the wearing of the burqa, that's a problem. In other words, it's everything. This is absolutely insidious. It's a genuine and real attack. And it will include, also, it will cover what you want to cover on this channel, for example.
Yeah, now everybody can agree we have existing hate speech laws. Nobody should be persecuted for their faith, their sexuality, their ethnicity, whatever. But we do have laws that already deal with that. Why do we need something specifically to cater for Islam? And for example, the Batley Grammar School teacher is still in hiding for simply showing a cartoon. That would be illegal, presumably, under this.
Of course it will. The thing is that we have a kind of de facto blasphemy law already in place. You mentioned Batley there. You know, the teacher is still in hiding 4 years later. Go right back to Salman Rushdie and the fatwa on his book, The Satanic Verses. All the way through now, basically, people have kind of internalised as well this fear, which is what it is, a fear of Islamic reaction. And so as a result, there's very, very little criticism. What this does, it actually widens it and it makes it official. It's a disgusting piece of legislation if it actually does end up being legislation. And basically, I would say everybody simply must ignore it. I certainly will not abide by it.
He certainly will not abide by it. Peter's a decent man. Peter believes in free speech. Peter is one of those gentlemen. Gentleman is the key word there. Who would always look to try and understand someone else's beliefs and perspective and tread very lightly before saying anything that might cause offence. He's a decent man and he's outraged by this, as am I. So what he's arguing here, or the position is trying to portray, is these are backdoor blasphemy laws, and as a consequence, legitimate concerns that people might have will become off limits, and you will be prosecuted should you voice your opinions. Now, what they appear to be doing is trying to shut down debate, when at a time I would argue we need more debate than ever before. We need more dialogue than ever before. And the ones who have been pushing this is the likes of that imam and a growing network of people I describe as Islamists, who believe that their viewpoint on the world is above scrutiny. And maybe that's the case in other parts of the world. I don't know. I don't live in other parts of the world. I've been to parts of the world where that is and that isn't. But where I live here, in the place I call home, no. Free speech is a fundamental right. And if you are offended by my free speech, and I'm not being discriminatory or provocative, if I was to say, for instance, I disagree with how in many Muslim countries men can marry what I consider to be children, girls who are children. I don't want to live in Iraq, where a 9-year-old now can be married. And some of my Muslim friends, well, that's not Islam. Hold on. It might not be. But these laws, this vagueness of what is being introduced around Muslimness, means anything and everything will be off limits to debate and discuss. And it's wrong. And Peter's right. Mr. Gendrick is right. The Reform MPs that have spoke about this are right. But you know something? I don't believe it is just about curbing our freedom of speech. Because the government is on a mission to demonise all as far right, silence as many of us as possible. You can clearly see, and I've said it repeatedly, Keir Starmer's government, the Labour Party government, right now is at war with its own people. And what they're trying to do here is also provoke a reaction from an increasingly angry and agitated wider white community to essentially do what you just described, Gary. They want us to kick off, so they can arrest more of you and put more of you in prison. I'm well, Ben. I am more well now than I have been for a long time. And I can't do my work, Janet, without you, you know. This is a partnership as far as I'm concerned. So that's the second reason. And it has more validity, I think, than anything the first reason had, or didn't have, in my opinion. There is, however, a third reason that hasn't been really discussed on GB News or any of the newspapers, and I want to come to that now. If you'll humour me, that is. Please, the 1,671 people viewing this at various stages, and there's 334 of you that are right now here with me. At the very least, press like, maybe share, and please do support me, buy me a coffee. It'll only take you a moment. I'm just going to go and refill my glass, get a drink, and I'll come back and do the third bit with you. So I want to talk to you about a third reason. You've seen the two reasons that have been played out in the mainstream media. The first one is somehow we need a definition because Muslims are under attack in a specific way and they need to be protected. The second reason is that the government want to curtail our freedom of speech and silence dissent. The third reason is this. For some time now, there has been a civil war waging between two factions of the bloc Muslim vote that the Labour Party rely on in the best part of 100 constituencies. Remember, we only have 600 MPs, give or take. To the best part of 100, the Muslim bloc vote either determines or is heavily influences the outcome of an election. There are two factions. The elderly community leaders and the community just block voting Labour that way because Labour protected them, provided them with work, were more conducive towards ethnic minorities than the Conservatives. That was the perception. And the Liberals are too promoting of gays and all sorts of other stuff, which puts up off the Muslims. The Muslims, the contradiction here really is the Muslim community in the United Kingdom is actually a conservative community. If you looked at its values, forget the Islamists for a second, if you looked at its values in its widest sense, it aligns more with the Conservative Party's values than it does with Labour, and definitely not the Liberals. But put that to one side. The elderly leaders and all of that, they've gone in the main. And what replaced them was what I refer to as the cartels. Businessmen who exchange the votes for benefits. And sometimes these businessmen are linked to organised crime groups. And for a while, they were the only show in town. But as political Islam expanded from the days of Salman Rushdie's satanic verses, all the way up to now, the pro-Gaza protests, a new gang is in town, the Islamists. And what the white Labour Party politicians, using their very oversimplified colonial mindset, what they are trying to do is support their cartel boys because the Islamists don't want to play with them. Why would the Islamists want to play with any democratic party in any way? The Islamists want the Sharia. They want the caliphate. That's what a definition of an Islamist is. Definition of a jihadist is someone who will use violent extremism to achieve the aims of the caliphate. The Islamists are happy to use democracy against us to take control. So as this civil war is waging, the white Labour Party politicians such as Angela Rayner are trying to shore up the Muslim vote, their support bank, which is why they do this.
My voters were very upset with the Labour Party. I was with you and you saw me over the line. You supported me in seats that are similar to mine. People lost their seat. You were there for me, and I don't believe I could have done that without you. Now,
You can see that. She's begging, she's pandering, she's going and sitting in a room in a way she wouldn't do anywhere else. In any other setting, she'd be saying, where are the women? Look how conservatively she's dressed. Just is pandering to this demographic, trying to show up a vote. But it's not been enough, which is why they then did this. They produced documents like this. This is an Oldham Labour document. Our calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. So whilst the Islamists came out and said one state solution, ceasefire, Labour have been trying to outflank the Islamists, the vote that the Muslims have, that is being drawn to the Islamists, by saying, no, we stand for the Muslims too. This is their own leaflet, you can see it. Now what on earth Oldham Labour, in terms of a council, had to do with any of this is beyond me. What part of cleaning the streets, collecting the bins, making sure the street parks are clean, the community groups are funded, this has to do with it, I don't know, but they even passed resolutions. And when the Islamist faction in the Oldham Council, that I call them the sectarians, the Muslim group, the Oldham group, sorry, not the Muslim group, just really changed their name to the Muslim group. When they put a motion down, each time to do with Gaza or each time to do with Muslim oppression, Labour Party amends it and makes it even more stronger. So they've been trying to outflank each other. And because they've been trying to outflank each other, this then took place. One of the first things I saw not long after Labour came into power. Listen to it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. November marks Islamophobia Awareness Month. Last year, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution condemning the desecration of religious texts, including the Quran, despite opposition from the previous government. Acts of such mindless desecration only serve to fuel division and hatred within our society. Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions?
Can I agree with him that desecration is awful and I think should be condemned across the House? We are, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, including, of course, Islamophobia in all of its forms. Thank you.
I think his name was Tahir Ali. He's an MP, a Labour Party MP. So they're going back into their communities saying, no, the Islamist MPs and the Islamist faction can't represent you. We can represent the Muslims better. And that's how it's got here. That's how we've ended up in this mess. They're being effectively held to ransom by a small demographic, and in those communities they've got themselves into such a mess. They're trying to out-Muslim each other. And to show you what the other faction looks like, and I use Oldham as an example all the time because I'm from Oldham and I understand it, but I think you will understand it as well when I show you. Let me show you this. This is the Islamic faction. That's who they are. That's a photograph of them. Now I'm going to play a video. Give me 1 second. I just want to bring a video up so you see it. When I first saw it, it looked like a terrorist video, one of those, you know. But it's deadly serious.
of the Hollywood ward in Oldham. I'm joined by my good friend Councillor Irfan, also of the Hollywood ward. We are missing today Councillor Ghaffur, as he is currently away on business out of the country. So today I cannot speak for Councillor Ghaffur, and I propose to speak for Councillor Irfan and to my left Naveed Chauhan, who is the official Conservative candidate in the Waterhead ward. As many of you know, I began my political career some 12 months ago when I convinced the Conservative Party to entrust me with a ticket for the May 23 all-out local elections. I promised the party at the time that I would paint the ward blue by taking all 3 seats for the Conservatives. I'm delighted to say I played my part, as did Councillor Irfan and as did our good friend Councillor Ghaffur. We made history overturning the safe Labour seat, safe Labour ward even, and winning all 3 seats, enabling the Conservatives to become the main opposition party in Oldham Council. After careful consideration and deep reflection, Councillor Irfan, Naveed Chauhan and I have made the decision to resign from the Conservative Party. This decision comes as a result of the party's involvement in what can only be perceived as aiding and abetting a genocide of the Palestinian people by the Israeli Zionist regime. Both Councillor Irfan and I are currently suspended pending investigation. The 3 of us, including Councillor Ghaffur, are in the same situation, and the 3 of us, including Naveed Chauhan, who is the candidate in Waterhead, have advocated for the the right of freedom of speech. The 3 of us have today no longer in good conscience remain part of a party that, in our view, advocates the right to self-defense of an occupier, a party which is complicit in supplying millions in arms to a regime whose actions we oppose, especially when those arms are funded by the hard-earned money of taxpayers of this country, especially when the average Joe is crippled by the cost of living crisis, especially when the homelessness has not been eliminated from this country. How is it we can help fund a genocide but can't provide shelter for our citizens? Injustice, be it under our nose or on the other side of the world, cannot be ignored. How long do you think the good people of this country will allow you to get away with this? How long do you think you can fool the good people of this country, making what is illegal legal and making what is legal illegal? Adopting a definition of anti-Semitism that conflates with anti-Zionism for the sole purpose to protect a genocidal occupier and to censor politicians like us, the media, the professors, academics, solicitors, barristers, doctors, any other professions you can think of, they are censored. I believe in the collective conscience of this nation and refuse to be censored. I believe in free speech. Why are authorities censoring the citizens and their leaders' freedom of speech? That is the question one should ask. I have lost belief in all established political parties being a voice for the people. They are proving to be more self-serving than any time in history. They are not working in the best interest of this country. And as for Rishi Sunak, you were celebrated as someone who broke glass ceilings for the citizens of South Asian descent. The reality is you do not have a mandate of the people of this country. You are a disgrace, and with the will of Allah you will be disgraced further whenever you have the nerve to call a general election. Do not think you will get a free pass. And to all my constituents, I implore you to embrace or oppose our differences of opinions. But above all, we must fiercely defend each other's rights to express our beliefs freely and without fear of repercussion. We leave not with a heavy heart, but with a determination and a firm commitment to continue advocating for justice, equality and human rights. We will focus on making a real change in our ward, in our town and in our country. Thank you to all the brothers present here. May Allah bless you all. And we cannot forget all the brothers and sisters that are not here who have supported us along this journey, and invite you all to unite behind us as we embark on a new journey. Thank you very much.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Apparently they believe in free speech. Apparently they believe in free speech. This is Councillor Abdul Wahid. He is the deputy leader of a political group that sits in Oldham Council called the Oldham Group. They are Pakistani sectarians, Muslim sectarians. I fought against them, I lost. The supporters smeared me, had me threatened. One of my campaigners, one of my leafleteers, an elderly gentleman, was chased down the street. He had a bad fall, badly damaged. The mosques issued fatwas against me. And that is where I was ready to call it a day. Because we are on the verge of defeat, as you can see. They believe in free speech as long as the free speech benefits their political perspective. And now they will support the blasphemy laws, in my opinion. These men and their supporters and I have absolutely nothing in common. We might have the same colour skin, but I think it's clear to each and every one of you that they have nothing in common with people like me. So this is a traditional Labour Party voter base. They've split. The cartels have split. One side has banded support, gone with the Islamist viewpoint. I don't think they believe in democracy at all. And that has caused the Labour Party into a reaction. And that Labour Party reaction is what Angela Rayner announced today. Yeah, there is an internal civil war within the traditional Pakistani Bangladeshi Labour Party supporting community. Influence the best part of 100 constituencies. And I'm sharing this with you because I come from those places and I can see what's taking place. So this definitely isn't about protecting Muslims. This Islamophobia Council. Get that out of your mind. Yes, it is about curbing free speech and attacking you and attacking me as far right and racists and Islamophobes now. But that isn't the main reason. The main reason is that the Labour Party are involved in a civil war with their Muslim voter base, and to try and outflank the Islamist separatists who are taking votes away from them, so much so that there's 4 Islamist MPs now, according to Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, who describes them as Islamists, remember. And this is the Labour Party attempting to contain what's taking place. Let me pause there, and I'll continue to the next section. If you are still here and if you're still finding value. I do long form content. I think you've seen this by now, those of you who are new. Some people come and go and say, Raja, you need to do it in 2 minutes, 5 minutes. I can't. These aren't subjects I can articulate to you in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes. And as you can see, I lay things out in a formulaic and systematic way where I hope you understand. And if you have any questions, I'm forever looking at the screen on my right where your comments come up. If you have any questions, I can see them. I'll try my best to answer them. And I'll most definitely run a workshop on this in a Zoom style session. Every constituency where the Muslim community has a substantial impact on the election of councillors and the election of MPs. I think that's exactly well articulated, Ariane. And the postal votes are fought over, aren't they? They're fought over between both factions. So, no, James English hasn't spoken to me, mate. I've tried to reach out to as many people as I can. The last of my interviews was his Lotus Seaters in terms of the UK. So if anyone else wants to speak to me on these issues, I'm happy to sit down. You can all see I don't go with notes or anything like that. This is a subject matter that I'm an expert in, I understand. I'll hone my own in dialogue and discussion on this issue and these issues with absolutely anyone. No, my chin's up. I want you to understand the gravity of the situation we find ourselves in. So what do we do about it? We mobilise. We put pressure on our politicians to genuinely represent us. And we go to the next general election. Whether it be in the Conservative manifesto or in Reform's manifesto. And I keep talking about both of them as equal partners here because those are the only two that I can see fighting Labour. I'm sorry to the others. As political institutions, I don't think they will. They've both got their weaknesses, they've both got their strengths. I don't think it's a given, I think is what I mean to say. But in the same way, postal votes need to be reformed, being incorporated into the manifestos. There needs to be something about freedom of speech being enshrined in there. And the United Kingdom is no place for blasphemy laws, either direct or indirect. And I'll help you. I'll help you understand this. I'll help you get educated. I've told you, I'm invested in this. I'm invested in this in my life. Is where I'm invested with this in. I'll teach you to navigate the racist traps that they lay. And I'll teach you to corner your politicians, your representatives in a way, because the majority of them aren't decent, sadly. The majority of them want an easy life and are scared to touch these sorts of issues. But we'll corner them in such a way where they will have to. So that's who I am, that's where I am. And please, the only way I can continue doing this is you supporting me. It's as simple as that. There's 2,280 of you. If each of you bought me a samosa, I'd be okay for best part of 6 months. To this day, the vast majority of my support comes from a very small number of you. And I know, the longer I've spent in this space, I know the value I bring. So please, share the work, raise awareness. Believe we can be the difference, because if we're not going to be the difference, we will lose. We should not be arrogant into thinking we cannot and we won't become the next Iran or the next Lebanon or the next Turkey. And going back to my interview with Dan from Lotus Eaters, very proud man. And I think, on my reflection of my interview with him, a man who believes increasingly that Islam is incompatible. I don't believe that. I don't want to believe that because of my own faith. But he asked me, where will this end? Because they won't stop here when they're trying to outflank each other to keep a minority on board. They won't end here. Oh, ceasefire in Gaza. Oh no, more ceasefire in Gaza. War crimes against Israel. Oh no, more war crimes. They won't end here. Blasphemy laws. Do you know where it'll end? Because I have an opinion on where it'll end. No, they won't take over the country. What they will end up with, if we continue on this path, is semi-autonomous regions or areas of the United Kingdom, ring-fenced, silos, enclaves. Where the black banners fly. And the Sharia is the law. That is where it'll end, if we do not do something about it. For those of you new to me, my name is Raja Miah. In a past life, I advised the government on safeguarding children and protecting our communities from extremism. For the last 6 years, I have led a campaign in my hometown of Oldham to try and force a public inquiry into the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our children. In January this year, I came to the realization that I and a small number of the people of the town who stood alongside me, who we politically mobilised and removed 3 successive Labour Party leaders. Our duty, our responsibility was no longer just to our town, but the people of our nation. And so, our call to all of you, do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.